For the past month, I've been using one of the most polarizing phones of the year. Some people love this phone, some people hate this phone. This is the iPhone SE 2022, and iPhone lovers are going to say it's a great deal, giving you the Apple ecosystem at a fraction of the cost of a new iPhone. But non-Apple fans are going to say it's a total ripoff, and say if any Android device came out with these specs and looking like this, nobody would buy it and it'd be laughed off the market. But did Apple get a special pass, or is this actually a good phone? I've been testing this phone for the past few weeks, as I said, and I wanted to answer that question. Now in this video, I want to talk about 4 main topics that really summarize the iPhone SE and my experience with it. And this is the build, the screen, the camera, and the features. Now all 4 of these, I'm trying to cover things that were not covered in the original review. These are things based on my experience in the past couple weeks of actually using this phone. So I want to start off with the build and the overall design of it. One of the big benefits, of course, a lot of people want to get a case. And if you're looking to get a case for any new phone, usually there's a relatively limited selection, but this phone being the same design as the old iPhone SE and the iPhone 8, and the point is, iPhone 8 cases will fit on this phone, which is great. You have a better selection and a lower cost as well. The other big benefit that I noticed with this one, and this is something that admittedly you do notice right out of the box, but over time I still really did like it, and that is this used to be a flagship phone. Because this design was actually used in a flagship a couple years ago, it doesn't have a lot of the usual mid-range compromises that other companies make when they're designing a mid-range phone from scratch. So it has a fast processor, it has an IP water resistance rating, it has wireless charging, and it has a glass back. All 4 of those are things that you don't typically see in mid-range phones, which does give you a more premium feel. But of course, although back in 2017 this would have been an absolute killer phone, that was 5 years ago, and today it does have a pretty antiquated looking design, but looks aren't everything, and this had plenty of benefits as well. One of them, and probably the biggest one in my opinion, is just the size and form factor of this. There are plenty of people out there that want a smaller, less boxy, less bulky phone, and that's exactly what this is. Looking at this compared to the iPhone 13 Pro, you can see this is substantially slimmer, it doesn't have a massive camera bump, it's smaller in really every dimension, which makes it easier for one-handed use, and it makes it more pocketable as well. Now, tiny phones have their compromises, we'll talk about that with the display later on in this video, but having a smaller phone definitely has quite a few benefits. And as a quick side note, I will be comparing this phone to the Google Pixel 5a and the Galaxy A53 to see which is the absolute best mid-range phone. If you want to see that, be sure to go down and click that subscribe button. The 2022 model of the iPhone SE, from my experience, also had an advantage over the 2020 version of the iPhone SE. Now, maybe I had a bit of an outlier, but I noticed that it had a pretty strong lip all the way around. Sometimes, like if I was on a phone call, it would grab your hair a little bit. If you felt it with your finger, it was kind of a sharper edge. And this one does not have that issue. So again, I don't know if that was something that was just a bad tolerance stack on the model I had from 2020, but this one, at least right here, does not have any issue like that at all. It is unfortunate though that Apple didn't add any of their newer things to this. They're using exactly the same design as before, despite putting maybe a slightly different battery, slightly different processor. It felt like this would be a perfect opportunity for them to sell some MagSafe products by putting MagSafe in the back of this phone. If there was space for it, I would love to see that, because wireless charging is great, but if you came from a different iPhone, or if anybody else in your family has an iPhone and they're using MagSafe chargers, this doesn't work with them. Like, you can technically charge on it, but any kind of stand with MagSafe, it's not going to stay there. It's going to fall right off. So barring the screen, to summarize my experience with the design, I love having a smaller phone. In today's market in particular, it's really hard to find a phone that's this small and this slim while still being really fast and having a pretty decent battery life. But I will say, if you're looking for that new phone clout, you know, the excitement of somebody saying, hey, did you get the new iPhone? Odds are if you have this, nobody's going to ask if you got a new phone. This looks like an old phone because the design is an old phone. But let's move on to the next thing that I just omitted right there, being the screen. So of everything I experienced with this phone, there's a lot of things that I really did like I said, the smaller design. But one thing, probably the biggest limitation I faced, was the screen. And I know you've probably been seeing this in a lot of the original reviews, but I wanted to kind of give it more time to see if I got used to this, if I didn't mind the screen. And there were some times when I didn't mind it, like texting and doing some normal stuff didn't really matter, but there were also quite a few times that I just felt so limited from this massive bezel on the top and bottom, and the very small, very low quality display. So even when this phone came out, it was considered a relatively low quality display. This is a 720p display, 60 Hz. It doesn't get that bright, so if you're outside in broad daylight, it's not going to be especially easy to see this phone. And although the small screen is perfect for younger kids, I think another big market that this phone would probably appeal to would be an older generation. They want to use iOS, it's easy, it's simple, and on top of that, it's a more affordable phone. So this is going to probably be a big seller for an older generation. And older people, I think, if you have any kind of vision impairments, it's going to be hard to be working with such a tiny display compared to what other phones on the market are offering. But like I said, the display on this is overall a pretty big limitation. You do kind of get used to it, but mostly just because you forget how good other phones actually are. But moving on to the camera, the third category I want to talk about, of everything I tried with this entire phone, the camera was probably the least limiting. In fact, the camera was actually really nice on here. Although you're not getting the same flagship cameras, maybe 2 or 3 cameras, the photos on here are, from many standards, not that different from flagship phones. There are a couple limitations with what the camera can do, but in broad daylight, you're getting fantastic dynamic range, you're getting fantastic sharpness, great color, overall a really great experience with here, and Apple's actually bringing in some really nice features that we saw on the newest iPhones this year, being the photographic styles. So you can easily take a photo that looks like an iPhone photo, or you can take one that looks like a Pixel photo. You can take one that looks really however you like. Unfortunately, one camera feature that I really wish made it on here that didn't is night mode. So this is not able to take any kind of really late night shots at all. The A15 Bionic chip does a decent job of removing noise if it's kind of a low-ish light, but as soon as it starts to get dark, it just doesn't look good at all. It's not able to do that. It doesn't have any kind of long exposure unless you get an app for that, which is exactly what I've been doing for the past month. I've been using Night Cam, but there are quite a few other apps as well that allow you to control the settings and essentially take night photos. Regardless, like I said, it does have most of the things on here, like photographic styles, portrait mode, a few other iOS camera tricks, but in general, the camera on here, I thought, did a really fantastic job. The video quality is even better by a long shot compared to almost anything else on the market at this price. The video on here, you're shooting up to 4K 60, you're getting good audio on here, really good sharpness, good color, and I mean, the overall speed of this processor is just so impressive. Like, I shot a 4K 60 video, I edited the video on here, I applied color grading, I cropped the video, I rotated the video, I did everything I could possibly think of to this video, and it was still able to render it back in real time. I could watch the video, it didn't even get warm. Like, the camera and the processor on here working together are really quite impressive. But of course, not every photo and video you're going to take are going to be using the native app on here. So Snapchat and Instagram, for example, have their own cameras, of course, and so I wanted to test those out. Now, as you can see right here, Snapchat is not as good as the native camera app, especially with the 7-megapixel front-facing camera, but it still gets the job done, and it's better than some Android phones out there. And then the fourth and final topic I wanted to talk about with this phone was the feature set. Now, there are some things that I just use occasionally with my other iPhones that I didn't have on this, and I felt like I was missing out a little bit. One of them is Animojis. It's not something I use all the time, but it's nice to have. As far as the warmth of this, I was really curious with a fast, big processor in here, was this going to get warm? My answer is no for that, at least from what I was doing. Like I said, I exported that 4K 60 video with every kind of edit I could possibly think to apply on here, and not only was it fast, it also didn't get warm at all. So I'm sure maybe if you're gaming, there's a way to get this to warm up a little bit, but from my experience, it really didn't get warm. Now, the battery life on here was standard. It was pretty good, but maybe not amazing. They say it's 2 hours longer than the previous iPhone SE, which is good because that one was a little bit brief. But the standby battery life on this is really quite amazing. If you set this phone down and you walk away for 2 days, you'll come back and the battery life will really have barely drained at all. But the overall battery life, if you're really pushing it, this is a powerful chip, so if you're gaming or doing anything more intense, it will really kind of chug your battery life, and it's not going to last forever. But for most standard use, I was easily able to get a couple hours of screen time and get through an entire day without it dying. I never really had any issue with this dying within 1 day. So in conclusion, my experience with this phone was really not bad. If you're dead set on an iPhone, this will get you into the ecosystem for the lowest price and give you a really long usage because you have such a new processor on here. It's going to go 4 or 5 years without even slowing down a little bit. But if you're willing to take a little risk, and I'm not necessarily recommending this, but you can get a far superior phone for about the same price. The iPhone 12 mini is a similar size but offers drastically better cameras, a way better display, and it's giving you a better design for less than $400 if you buy a refurbished one. If new, they're running you about $170 more than this one. Still possibly worth it if you're willing to spend that extra money, but I think the iPhone 12 mini is really one of the best phones Apple ever made. I'm a big fan of smaller phones, and I hope that in the next generation, in the iPhone SE 2024, I really hope they use the iPhone 12 mini body. But for now, that's my take on the iPhone SE 2022 after using it for the past month. Tech enthusiast will definitely not like this phone, but for your grandparents, your kid, or if you're just looking for a phone for yourself on a budget, it's really not a bad phone. If you enjoyed this video, consider liking and subscribing. I'm Mike O'Brien. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.